Hi everyone, my name is Alistair Reid and I'm the digital editor here at First Draft, based in London. I'm going to be running through the 7 types of mis and disinformation that we often see online. And it's important, the reason that we talk about 7 types of mis and disinformation is it's important to think about this as a spectrum. It's not just fake news, it's not just black and white, true and false, but it's a kind of scale of different shades of grey, of intent and of how things are perceived and any actual kind of meaning to deceive. So we're going to run through these 7 today, starting off with satire and parody. And this is obviously important in any kind of healthy democracy. But often what we see happening online is that a satire website or a joke account will make a joke. And then it will be obvious to everyone, their initial audience, that it was a joke. But as it starts to travel, as it starts to be shared, more and more people don't know the context and they don't know the source. And so they don't understand that it was a joke. And they share it on believing it was true when it's not. So that's number 1. Number 2 is false connection. And this is stuff like clickbait and those kind of headlines which are not supported when you read through the article or whatever the content might be. And a great example came recently out of India. This is a screenshot from a fact check by Boom Live, where an article claimed that alcohol could protect against the coronavirus. The article itself mentions scientific evidence saying, for alcohol and disinfectants, but there isn't any evidence to support drinking alcohol as a treatment. And this is particularly important because it can have very serious impact. In Iran, where alcohol is banned, the claim led to 44 people dying and hundreds being hospitalized after getting alcohol poisoning from drinking homemade alcohol. So it really can have a serious impact. Next up, we've got the misleading content. And this can take a variety of different forms, but it's largely about how certain facts or figures are framed to present a different picture, or that accidentally present a different picture when people don't know the context or the bigger picture. It can be a lot more difficult to detect. So the example I've got here is from a graph highlighted in an article by Popular Science on March 24th, when they were talking about exactly this problem. The graph shows that it makes it appear like it's only a handful of US states that have a problem where coronavirus is a serious problem, talking about the number of positive tests. But that is only one side of the story. If you look at the second graph that they put together, you can actually see that the states where they've got a high number of positive, confirmed cases, are the states where they're doing lots of tests. So it's only the tests that are showing up the number of cases. Now, this is an extra element that puts those first figures, in a whole new light. So misleading content isn't always designed to deceive. It can be accidental, but it is important to recognize that sometimes this is the case. Next, we've got false context. And I'd say this is probably the most common form of misinformation or disinformation that we see, where pictures or videos or quotes or maps or graphs or whatever have been taken out of their old context. They may be years old and presented in a new situation. In this example here, there was a map that was used by a whole load of news organizations in the UK and Australia to claim that 60,000 Wuhan residents, where lots of people from Wuhan had traveled. But the map was actually from a 2011 study that showed all of the air traffic across the entire year from all the airports. It was not anything to do with coronavirus whatsoever. This was an old map accidentally used in a new context. And it's important to recognize that this happens a lot, something to be careful of. Next, we've got imposter content. Now, this is when a hoaxer poses as someone else, basically, whether it's a news organization or a politician or a journalist or a public health organization, as we've got in this case, where someone pretended that a notice was from the World Health Organization. And essentially what's happening here is people are trying to manipulate our existing mental shortcuts, and the trust that we place in certain sources already, to sneak their falsehoods into our minds and into the public conversation. Manipulated content. The example here was when a face mask was added to a conversation between 2 politicians, and we on the scale of all the things we're talking about here, manipulated content we see relatively little of compared to that false context stuff that I was talking about. But it is really important to recognize it as a problem, and that it's not just having things digitally manipulated or added to like this. We've seen a spate recently of videos of politicians being slowed down where it makes it seem like they're slurring or like they're drunk. and that is manipulated content as well. So it's important to be aware of. Finally, we've got fabricated content. And this is the kind of thing which there is no basis of truth, or there's no grounding in reality whatsoever. Something that is completely made up, way up at the far end of the spectrum, where there's not even a tiny bit of truth to it whatsoever, as we see here. Now, out of all those seven, there's one thing to remember with all of this is memes, is that so much of the conversation around disinformation recently has been in terms of websites or articles or deep fakes and all this other stuff. But memes are one of the most effective ways to transmit information because they are simple and they are visual. And as such, they're very much favored by people who are the tricksters out there as an effective way to spread around their hoaxes. So it's something to be very careful and aware of.